It's quite unfortunate that our generation will not be like our parents, where cars are a bit more readily available and more accessible.
I've come to realize that cars are still, nevertheless, they're still a liability.
You're trading off cost, which is money, for time and convenience and quality.
So hey everyone, Stephen here, and welcome back to another episode of Heart of the Matter. Now today we're going to put the pedal to the metal and talk about cars, or cars specifically here in Singapore. Because Singapore already has the dubious honour of having the most expensive cars in the world. In case you don't understand, the COE refers to the Certificate of Entitlement, which is basically this piece of paper that allows you to buy and own a car for 10 years. So today we asked, do we really need to have a car here in Singapore? Maybe not as an individual, but what if you have a family? And are cars a necessary resource for families? Can families do without it? Do families have to rethink if they need a car? And what are the options and trade-offs? In studio with me today, we have Julian Kho. He is General Manager of Sgcarmart.
Hi guys, how's it going?
Toh Ting Feng, CEO and founder of car sharing company GetGo.
Hi everyone, pleasure to be here.
Lim Chong Tee, who became a father just a few months ago.
Hey, great to be here.
Okay, welcome guys. In case you can't remember, I'll just take a quick backtrack to previous year's COE prices. In September 2021, the COE price for cars in the open category was around $70,000. A year later, in September 22, it had climbed to $107,000. And now, 2023, it's in the $144,000 region. Now, this is the fifth consecutive rise in the open category. So,
If only our salary climbed that quickly.
or interest rates, from your returns on investment.
Yeah.
So okay, Julian, you go first.
Yes.
Your reaction to these skyrocketing prices.
I think it's inevitable. I think it's supply and demand, right? We're just talking about it. And it has always been government's objective to cut down the number of cars on the roads. And they know where to hurt the people the most, which is the pockets. It made me reconsider whether or not I should buy another car or a new car for that matter. So it must be effective, no?
Okay, so from your point of view, it sounds like things are here to stay. These prices we're looking at are not going to go down anytime soon.
It will go down, not anytime soon, unfortunately.
Okay.
However, if you're thinking whether or not Cat B from 140,000 today will suddenly drop back to 30,000 like what it was in 2019 or 18, I think maybe that's highly impossible.
Okay. Ting Feng?
Yeah, I think the COE prices are a result of policy, obviously. And I think currently our government has decided that we have a zero growth policy. So that means that every car that is available, every COE is available, has to come from a car that's deregistered, right? And as a result of the system, we have these peak and troughs in terms of supply of COEs. And right now, unfortunately, we are in a period where there's low supply.
Right.
And I think at the same time, post-pandemic, demand for cars has gone up as well, right? We have, our economy is doing better. There are people who are relocating here. And so I think that has resulted in the high COE prices. But like Julian has said, I think this will continue to stay because the government has said that we want to have car-like future.
Yeah.
So now the question is, what can we do about
alternatives? I don't think we can do very much about it, And Chong Tee, were there aspirations for you to own a car, especially knowing the kid was on the way? Were you thinking,
Yeah, before I was married and before I had a kid, the public transportation system works pretty well for me and for my wife. But ever since we had a baby, things have really changed. With a baby, you need to bring her to the polyclinic a lot. I have to bring her for vaccinations from time to time, and then there's just so much to bring around. Just to go out with a baby, you need to carry the diaper bag. So many things. Like we have 3 or 4 bags. It's just sometimes a little bit hard to just use only the transportation system. With the COE prices being so high, it does create quite a bit of stress for the family.
Okay, but you do sort of have a car to use right now, right?
Yeah, so we share the family car, right? So our parents bought it about, I think it was a 16-year-old car. So I have about 4 years left to share with them. But after that, if the prices are so high, I think it's a major deterrent.
So in your situation, it's not just you, your wife, and the baby using it. Your parents are using it as well.
They do. So we share the car, and kind of try to maximize the utility of it.
Okay, but that you had wanted to buy a car, but I guess simply because of the prices decided not to. Is that right?
Not a consideration at this price. Yeah, 100, 140 is just impossible. That's like I mean, a quarter of like a BTO nowadays. Yeah. Or,
You know, there are many starting young families, and
Yes.
yes, the convenience of having a car to take around the kids and
Yes.
do all the errands is significant, especially and also those with elderly parents and vulnerable. You know, but what is the likelihood or that a family in Singapore can ever own a car at this rate?
I think it's very difficult because we're not talking small money here. Is it ever possible, or will it ever be possible for a family with elderly folks and stuff, if they strike 40, maybe? But otherwise, I would say you got to think of alternatives. I mean, we can do car sharing. That's one. The second one would probably be car rentals, or maybe even car leasing if you have to visit the hospital for checkups very regularly. But I'll still say this, and I've said this many times, and I still say it: don't buy a car if it's really unnecessary. If you need to travel from point to point, take a Grab.
Yeah, but what do you mean by unnecessary?
Unnecessary meaning a sales guy, for instance, would need a car because
Okay.
that's his livelihood. No, I mean, he's got to run from point to point every day. I did a calculation, but that was many years ago. That was when, of course, car prices weren't that insane. If you do not spend more than $70 on public transportation a day, you won't really need a car. Because $70 would be for people who are like maybe perhaps sales guy, insurance agents, or maybe property agents. You know, you got to bring your clients to and fro different places. But if you don't spend more than that, you're essentially wasting money if you buy a car.
So if you do the math, it will be cheaper to not own a car.
Most definitely.
Based on that,
Most
right?
definitely.
Okay, and Ting Feng, that is generally the angle of car sharing, right?
If you think about it, when you have a very expensive asset, it doesn't make sense to leave it idle 85-90% of the time,
Right.
which is what happens to most cars all around the world, especially in Singapore, where car prices are so high. So the idea of behind car sharing, behind GetGo is really to enable, families and individuals like Chong Tee, for example, who have the occasional need to use the car, right, to be able to flexibly use it without having to pay for the entire car cost.
Okay,
right,
but
and
here's the
leave it
question,
idle.
Chong Tee, does that work for you? Are those car sharing services available often enough when you need it?
I have to walk quite a bit of distance to get a car, because the availability isn't always there. Before I moved over to my mother-in-law's and father-in-law's place in like Bedok, I was living in Sembawang, right? So and that's practically just south of JB, the very peak of Singapore at the north. I typically take about an hour and a half, to go to work around this area, right? And like just that time that you spend traveling can be very painful, right? Because not everybody lives near the central area. Now that I have a baby, I also want to go back home early. I also want to be able to kind of beat the traffic. Unfortunately, I think even for the Grab prices, they aren't exactly very friendly when you're living so far away during the peak hours. So, I mean, having a car really still creates a lot more convenience for the users. I think sometimes it's quite unfortunate that our generation will not be like our parents, where cars are a bit more readily available and more accessible. And
But your parents also didn't have car sharing services. There wasn't Grab available at that time, So the question is that, in a way, if you had no choice and you had to rely on just what was out there, the public transport network, so to speak, would that work for you? Is that feasible?
yes, but no at the same time. Okay, I'll explain why yes. Because I think generally the Singapore public transport system is still quite reliable, right? And nowadays there's like elderly and child-friendly lifts, that allow us to push our prams in, our grandparents up and down the lifts and all that. So in that sense, I think it will always work. But no, because I think that convenience of having a car to settle like day-to-day matters, to be able to go down for something emergency, like an emergency visit in the hospital, all these things still still kind of mean a lot for an individual. So that convenience is really aspiration for a lot of Singaporeans.
So the convenience, that seems to be the key word here.
Yeah.
To know that there's a car ready for me in the event of an emergency, or I just need to run out and buy milk or whatever, right?
Yeah, and a time safe, right? Because that changes the quality of life.
So if you had no children, if you were living nearer the city, would this be a different story?
Very different story.
Okay.
Yeah, but most of us don't stay near the city, so that's.
And it's largely because you have a child now, and maybe you're gonna have 3, 4, 5 more.
We think about it, but one for now, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because those with more kids, two or more children, they say if I'm getting around public transport, there's me, my husband, the two kids, the helper, sometimes the grandparents. So there's easily like 7 people at any one time. You end up taking 2 cabs anyway. So is that an argument to say maybe this group of people should have access to a car?
So here's a very personal story, right? When I had 2 kids, I actually did an experiment. I brought them to school via public transport for about 2 months.
Okay.
So carried their bags, held their hands, walked to the station, took a train, blah, 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 went to work. And I felt that I could do it. Brought them to the clinic, brought them to, parks and blah, blah, blah. I feel that I could actually succeed,
Okay.
you know? And then unfortunately, fortunately, my wife got pregnant. And then I realized, okay, now it's going to be tricky. So now that all 3 girls are out, I'm just thinking again, I don't know if I can still do that.
But you know what? To many listening to this podcast, they'll say, come on, man. I do it every day. I've got 3 kids at home,
Yeah, exactly. So this is my argument. I think humans will adapt. Humans always adapt. If I don't have a car, I'll bring my kids from point A to point B and then back to point A. But if I have got a car, I'll do point A, point B, point C, D, and then back to A. If I don't have a car, if I need to do point C and D, I'll do it tomorrow or next week or whatever. We'll just make plans around these things. But I have to agree with you. We cannot discount convenience. I think convenience does not have a price tag to that.
Yeah, so is that intangible asset of convenience and reassurance to know that you have the tool, in a way, ready for when you need it. But is that a strong enough argument? I mean, and you are paying for that convenience, right?
Yeah, I want to share a story with a friend of mine who had 3 kids, So sometimes when they go out and when it's raining, she literally run out of hands because carrying something on the left hand, a kid on the right hand, and then you have 2 more that's trying to run around, and when I think the mother or father, when they're trying to take care of so many kids without the car, I think they might feel this sense of why is it so unfair, so stressed, right? They don't have it because
so unfair.
Right now, what we're doing is we are letting the market decide the price, which I think is how we do most things, right? And that makes sense, right? You let the most willing party buy the COE and buy the car. But with this social stratification, this means that only maybe people who are earning a bit more money can afford a car, and for those who might not have earned that much, they have to use other options. So I think this can create a sense of disparity, right, in individuals who just aren't able to own a car and they have to go through those kind of inconveniences. Many of my friends, looking at how car prices are and everything, sometimes don't feel like having kids because, when you have a kid, you tend to feel like having a car, right? I think just human nature for having that feeling of wanting something. Yeah.
So if you could not have access to a car, would you not have any more kids?
I think it's a major consideration. Like, I would have to plan very carefully with my wife. For example, if the aspiration is to, maybe upgrade the house, to be able to save more for university for children, with a $140,000 price tag, that will affect a lot of these plans, right? So maybe we will buy a car, but this means that, we won't, have another kid, or maybe we will buy a car with a second kid. But this would mean that maybe we have to do away with some other things. So it can feel like it's a bit mutually exclusive, right? So you have to take some give and take a little bit. Yeah.
So when you think about it, I mean, we have to choose what our priorities are,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. So it doesn't mean that we won't have 2 kids, but it's just that you have to prioritize.
The question is, so what can we do about this? What can we do to help people, like Chong Tee? There are many families out there just starting out. Ting Feng, is it because our public infrastructure isn't quite there yet? We have car sharing, we have other, private hires and all that, but is it because we don't have enough of them?
Public transportation in Singapore is already pretty great. I think a lot of people live within walking distance of public transport. But like many of us pointed out, it serves you well when you're by yourself, right? But it doesn't serve you as well when you have a family involved, right? And of course, if you live further away from the city centre, it is a trade-off between time and money, right? So public transport alone can't be the solution, right? So we do need alternatives, ride-hailing, for example, car sharing, for example, and have these alternatives be good enough such that when we do need a mode of transportation that's more comfortable, that's more time saving, we can do that easily, such that we don't need to own cars anymore.
But my question is, are we there yet? Do we have... So now he decides, I want to go out, I want to hire used car sharing, but he goes down and the 2 cars in his block are gone.
Yes. So,
Right? So
so I think we can do more, right? I think we can do more. And that's part of our mission, right? But I don't want to oversell it. But, the stats are quite clear. Because of the COE quotas, only 400,000 households own cars out of 1.7 million. So there are more than 1 million households that don't own cars. So owning a car is really a privilege and a luxury. You're trading off cost, which is money, for time and convenience and quality, right? So I think alternatives like car sharing, what we strive to do is to make it a bit less binary. You may not need to go off your kid every single day, but at least you want to do so once or twice a week. If you want to go to the zoo, you need something that saves time, can carry more people, and the car can wait for you with the child seat inside, right? So that's what alternatives like car sharing seeks
But what
to
I'm
do.
asking, I guess, is that are we at the point yet where we can support this, or are we still evolving? Are we 50% of the way there now? Is there another 50% more growth in the sense in the car sharing, ride hailing sector to allow people like Chong Tee to then say, okay, I don't need a car?
I think so. I think there's a lot more we can do. I mean, if you look at our multi-story car parks, for example, right now, I mean, not just us alone. If you look at overall car sharing penetration, maybe there are 2 or 3 cars there serving 8 blocks.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the number of families that really need to use a car, it's higher than that.
How many cars should be available? Not just from you, but overall in terms of
So I think we looked at the market, we look at the mobility needs of the country. I think we need at least 10 to 20,000 car sharing vehicles in Singapore. And that translates to only 5 to 10 car sharing cars per HDB car park. So maybe double to 4 times of what we have now over the long term. Right. Of course, this depends on a lot more policy measures and people embracing quality of the car sharing services going up. But we see that as a future where then we can meet the needs of families. Yeah.
Will that work for you? Because I guess at that point where each time you need a car at the last minute and you go and there is a car, so after a while you might start thinking, okay, maybe I don't need to own a car.
Yeah, I think having more options is definitely good. And then if there's we can't own cars and at least there's an option out there, I think that will make a big difference for us. I think currently most of our cars are still gasoline cars. So if like our infrastructure can catch up with the electricity, allowing more electric cars, that could also help with the environment, having less pollution, or having different ways of charging the cars, right? So some of these things could probably help us.
But do you think that's an issue in terms of sustainability and whether we are more green? I mean, I'm just saying very, very matter-of-factly, how does that affect your decision as to whether you want to have a car or not?
Owning a car would also mean that your carbon footprint will be a lot higher, right, per individual, right? So I think if we can not own cars, but then still enjoy the function of a car.
It's your generation. You're looking more at the bigger picture, and you want things that are sustainable. Fair enough. We're all moving towards that. So if that option is more readily available, then you could take it. But I guess from your point of view right now, we're not quite there yet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Julian, what do you make of all this? So how then can we help families?
First and foremost, I'm all for electric cars. I think electric cars are great. They're less exciting, but I think they're still nevertheless, they serve a purpose. They're for the children and the children's children. That's what I believe. How is it going to help families? I mean, honestly, at this point in time, I don't think many families care much, or maybe they won't think so much about whether or not they want to choose between an electrified vehicle or an internal combustion engine vehicle. I think at this point in time, money is the thing that holds them back the most. It will hold me back for sure, because I've been in this business for over a decade now. I've come to realize that cars are still, nevertheless, they're still a liability. Do I want to spend 140,000 on COE plus a machine rather adds up to about maybe 200,000 for a car, or do I want to take 200,000 to buy a property? So
again, it's priorities. You're choosing.
It's priorities to me. Yeah.
One other question: is this a generational thing? So in a way, maybe if you grow up without a car and you live without a car all your life, then when you have a family, you may say, I actually don't need a car because you're used to it.
I think if I never enjoyed the luxury of a car, my perception might be slightly different as well. I do think it's also a generational thing because we do look at what our parents have, and then a lot of times we talk about progress, right? And like how we are a lot better off than the previous generations. But not being able to enjoy something that our parents have, it's a very bitter pill to swallow, I would say.
Yeah. Someone once asked me, hey, have you ever flown first class on a plane? I'm like, no, never. It's like, you want to try? It's like, no, I don't want to, because then forever I'll be thinking, oh man, if only I had flown first class. If I've never tasted it, I will never know what it's like.
Yep. Good call.
Good call, yeah.
Where do we go from here? What else needs to change in our infrastructure to, I guess, help not just families, but individuals and anyone who has thought of owning a car but realized they don't have to now? What do we need to fix, I guess, or improve on to allow these people to then say, okay, I can live without a car?
I think for us, we believe that technology has to be a key part of the solution, right? So through the use of technology, what we are trying to do is to make sharing as good as owning, as dependable, as predictable, much more affordable. And I think that not only applies to car sharing, but also other shared mobility methods as well, and even public transportation. And I think that investment in technology and, of course, infrastructure will really allow us to create a menu of options, right? Which in totality can be almost as good as owning a car when you need it. So I think that's our view.
And it must be actually cheaper at the end of the day than owning a car.
It has to be cheaper than owning a car. It has to be cheaper because it's more efficient than owning a car, right? Because many people are using the same asset. Yeah.
So the question now is, in your view, how many years are we away from reaching that point?
If you give us 5 to 10 years, I think with advances in technology, with the scaling of these services, I think we can get pretty close to what people expect out of owning a car, right? It will never be exactly the same,
right?
Because when you own the car, it's just sitting there waiting for you. But I think you can get much closer.
Julian, what do you think? How this is bad for your business, actually, because if people buy less cars,
I'm actually very curious, Ting Feng. I mean, I think availability and affordability, both of them are very important. But what about the consideration of people's perception? How we can be. We want to own a car. If I have to share a car, perhaps, when I feel that, this car is not mine, I don't feel good using it. I'm sure you guys do a lot of research about this. I'm sure this happens from time to time, and these results always come out. Is this a problem, actually?
I think mindsets are changing, right? Of course, everyone prefers to have their own thing, right? But when you have other better users for your hard-earned money, then you are much more open. For example, you can invest so that you can build a nest egg for your kids' education. You can buy property. So I think now the younger generation are much more savvy in terms of how to put their money to work, right? And they're also less tied to owning things as well. So this idea of enjoying a better quality of life, through investing more wisely, using your money more, I think it's much more prevalent these days amongst the young, right? The ownership mentality is still around, but it's less and less so, I believe.
So I did try it for 2 weeks using all the car sharing services. Just need to bring a good packet of wet wipes to wipe down the car prior to using it. That pretty much solved the problem,
But I'm all for car sharing as well. I think car sharing is great. I think it solves people's problems at a much more affordable price. So we go out for drinks. Obviously, I'm not going to drive. So I thought, I'll drive to the destination. I'll see what happens. I realized it was slightly more expensive than if I were to take a taxi, actually. Now I realized if that's going to be the case, I'd rather just take a cab. I don't have to worry about driving at all. I'll be chauffeured. I'll be driven. Wouldn't that be better? You know what I mean? So I believe affordability has got to be... It has to be attractive. That is a factor that we have to consider. And of course, availability. I mean, like yourself, Chong Tee, you don't want to go to the car park and realize that, I'm already late for my appointment and the car is not even available. You know what I mean? So I think these two is very important. Affordability and availability.
So, Chong Tee, you've heard from everyone. So how many children are you going to have now?
2, 3, maybe 4. I'm not sure.
There you go. With or without a car?
So that's the tough question, right? So I think I hear from both of them. I think our public transportation system is forming up. We're having more MRTs, and I think we are, upgrading our infrastructure to have more charging ports and all that. They are not going to happen overnight. I'm just thinking whether there's before we reach there, while we are on this journey to reach the ideal point where we are car light, whether they can be, from a policy standpoint, whether there can be a differentiated measure for some families who might need it more. I have known of people who own like 2 or 3 cars, and they might not need as much cars. So it's a little bit like the property problem, right? But there are a lot of families who just can't, have the basic thing, right? In this case, it is a car, right? While some families are owning multiple properties. I mean, nothing wrong with that. It's just that, that feeling of being left behind or being unable to catch up, do make families feel a little bit down. So there can be some type of price discrimination. There can be some form of subsidies for very specific conditions. That could potentially, open up some doors where some families who really need it, they have elderly, they have a few children, that would really benefit them, and I think that could be something that maybe the academics can study as the interim.
Well, you're not the first to think of this. I mean, it has been discussed before in terms of how the COE should perhaps be reviewed, but that is a discussion we need to have another day because it's a whole other can of worms,
Yeah, it's complicated.
But the upside is that as the kids get older, I don't know, Julian, for you, my kids are teenagers now, so they're pretty much taking the bus and the MRT on their own now. So in that sense, I think it's also a stage of life. Perhaps, you need a car for a period of time, but maybe not forever. The only challenge is that I do realize that once you've had a car, it's very hard to let go of it.
Of course.
So if I had to renew my car COE now, I'd be really hard pressed to decide. Okay, thankfully I have a few more years. Anyhow, so there will always be certain groups of people who will benefit more from having a set of wheels, and it's not always about the dollars and cents. The convenience is key, but also the peace of mind of knowing that you have a tool at your doorstep as and when you need it. So on that note, Chong Tee, wish you well. I hope next time we hear from you, you have had more kids with or without a car. I don't know. Ultimately, it's a choice we all make, and we do have to choose our own priorities. Thank you for coming in and speaking with me, and for all of you who have been listening in as well. A big thanks. This has been Heart of the Matter, and the team behind the podcast is Jacqueline Chan, Jacelyn Tan, Joanne Chan, Tiffany Ang, Saya Win, Crispina Robert, and I'm Stephen Chia. Bye for now.